Hi, I'm Lit Marie. I spent years in the classroom as an elementary school teacher, and now I work with 240 to help teachers pass their certification exams. And today, I'm gonna help you. This video is going to prepare you for the GACE Elementary Education Test 1, which covers language arts and social studies. This is one of the tests you'll take to teach elementary school in Georgia. In this video, we're gonna cover 3 things: what's on the test and how to study for it, the biggest concepts to know for test day, and we're gonna look at a few practice questions. Let's jump right into it. Now, the GACE Elementary Test 1 can be broken into 3 sub-areas: reading and language arts, social studies, and analysis. Each sub-area is worth a certain percentage of the exam. Sub-areas 1 and 2 are comprised of multiple choice questions, while sub-area 3 includes 2 constructed response questions, which are just like essays. Each sub-area has objectives that give more detail about what will be covered in your exam. However, in this video, we're only going to cover 1 key concept from each objective. The first objective is all about reading. You'll need to know how to develop students' comprehension skills, both for literary and informational text. This is huge and super important. Learning how to understand what they read is one of the most essential skills students develop in elementary school. And we have plenty of information of this in the study guide. But for now, let's zoom in on the different levels of comprehension. You need to know the difference between literal, inferential, and evaluative comprehension. And you'll need to be able to recognize which strategies or types of questioning are best to develop each kind of comprehension. To build literal comprehension, work on things like summarizing and identifying plot elements, like setting. For inferential comprehension, help students recognize cause and effect relationships and make predictions. To develop evaluative comprehension, model metacognition and help students make opinions about the text. To practice many of these skills, I loved using graphic organizers. When my team planned a reading lesson, I'd always say, "I've got a graphic organizer for that." So I wasn't as popular as the teacher who always brought in donuts, but I still know how to have a good time. This is great information for you to better understand Objective 1. And now, let's move on to Objective 2. This one is all about understanding and applying foundational skills. More specifically, you will need to know about literacy development and fluency, and of course, the role fluency plays to support comprehension. There's so much packed in here, I don't even know where to start. I know. I'll let the wheel of literacy skills decide for me. Now, you don't have to play this kind of game when it comes to your test prep. You can get a 240 study guide and have everything you need at your fingertips. The study guide is full of instructional content, including flashcards and videos, and questions, with a full-length practice test, all aligned to your exam. But since we can't cover everything in this video, let's have a little fun and spin the wheel. Perfect! Phonological awareness is definitely something you'll want to know for this objective. Let's take a peek inside our study guide and see one of those videos I mentioned before.
Phonological awareness is an umbrella term that includes the ability to hear individual words, syllables, and sounds in spoken language. If you're aware that words can be broken into parts, then you already have some phonological awareness. Before learning to read, children must recognize that words are made up of phonemes, or sounds of speech. There is often a misunderstanding that phonemic awareness and phonological awareness are the same. Phonemic awareness is essentially a subcategory of phonological awareness. Phonological awareness encompasses the ability to recognize individual phonemes, but also syllables and words. Phonemic awareness refers only to the ability to hear and use individual units of sounds or phonemes. Phonological awareness typically develops in a simple to complex progression. Let's use stair steps to demonstrate how phonological awareness skills build. Rhyme awareness is the ability to hear when words rhyme or sound the same at the end, and alliteration is the ability to identify when words have the same first sound. Think of rhymes like blue and flew, and alliteration like candy and cookie.
I love studying with videos, don't you? Okay, Let's keep moving to the third objective. This one is all about helping students through the writing process. You'll need to apply this to different types of writing and know about resources that can help students produce and publish writing. The likelihood of seeing questions about the stages of the writing process is high, so let's really dig in here. The stages are pre-writing, drafting, revising, editing, and publishing. Revising and editing are so easy to mix up, so let's go over these two in detail. Revising entails reviewing the draft and making adjustments to improve the content of the writing. This is the time to make sure the writing clearly addresses the purpose and audience. Improvements to the organization and word choice are also made here. Details are analyzed to determine if there are any that should be added, deleted, changed, or moved to support the overall clarity of the writing piece. Now, editing also entails reviewing the draft, but this time, focusing on improving the conventions of the writing. This is the time to zero in on proper grammar, spelling, punctuation, and capitalization, and making corrections to those as needed. In simple terms, revising improves content, editing corrects conventions. All right, I honestly could write a whole book about this. Or maybe a study guide. Let's just move on to Objective 4, which is all about speaking, listening, and presenting. You'll need to know how to help students collaborate in conversation, as well as participate as both a speaker and audience member in grade-appropriate presentations. Did you know there is a best type of listening to facilitate in your classroom? It's the active kind. Active listeners are engaged in what is being said and respond to the speaker to improve communication. Let's go over some of the verbs commonly associated with active listening. Active listeners encourage the speaker by using nonverbal communication, such as eye contact and subtle head nods to indicate interest. Active listeners can paraphrase the speaker's message by putting it in their own words. They can also summarize the presentation by reducing it to the main points. Active listeners monitor their own understanding and clarify ideas by asking the speaker questions if needed. They also reflect on the speaker's message by thinking carefully about it and maybe even evaluate it by assessing its quality. I can tell you actively listen to all the information and are ready to move on onto the last reading and language arts objective on this exam. And if not, feel free to rewind. Or even better, subscribe to the study guide. You can go over all the info there as many times as you'd like. All right, here we go into Objective 5. This one is all about English language grammar and vocabulary development. You'll need to know the conventions of standard English, like punctuation and spelling, and how to help students determine the meaning of unknown words. Most vocabulary is actually learned indirectly. Teachers should expose students to targeted words in multiple contexts. A great way to do this is to plan a thematic or integrated unit, so you can provide your students with lots of different opportunities to read, write, hear, and speak using the new terms. The more times a student works with a vocabulary word, the more likely they are to make connections between those contexts and internalize the meaning of the word. You've made it through the reading and language arts objectives. You are doing great. The first objective in the social studies sub-area is all about where social studies information comes from and teaching students how to process it. So this one leans more towards pedagogy and social studies skills versus content knowledge. You'll see questions about finding and evaluating sources, teaching research skills, and teaching students how to interpret what they've learned. The rest of the objectives in this sub-area focus on content knowledge, but we will return to pedagogy concepts in sub-area 3, so keep an eye out for more on this later. Objective 2 requires you to demonstrate your history knowledge and skills. These questions only cover US and Georgia history, so no panic. You will not be required to study world history for this test. History questions will focus on important events and figures throughout US and Georgia history, Native American culture in North America, causes and effect of key events like the American Revolution, factors that shaped development during the colonial period, and issues related to the founding and development of U.S. democracy. Need to brush up on all of that? We have it covered for you in the study guide. Objective 3 is all about geography. These questions will focus on how U.S. geography impacted human settlement and development, and also basic knowledge of maps and how to use them. This is one of the most narrow objectives, which makes studying for it fairly straightforward. But these questions can also feel a bit complex because they often require you to draw on geography, history, and cultural content knowledge to find the right answer. Let's look at an example. You might see a geography question that asks about Native American groups in a certain region and how they used and adapted the land. Even though this is a geography question, you will likely need to draw on both your history content knowledge and your U.S. geography knowledge to answer this question. That may sound tricky, but our materials are designed to help you make natural connections between geography and history. Check this out.
The Native Americans were several distinct tribes, varied in their economic and cultural practices. The geography of their regions and the available resources greatly impacted their shelter, food sources, and general way of life. The eastern woodlands region consisted of fertile wooded lands, rivers, and streams. These geographic features made inland farming, coastal farming, and fishing the primary ways these native groups grew and acquired food. The location of this region also led to early contact with European explorers. Notable tribes from this region include the Iroquoian-speaking Iroquois and the Algonquian-speaking Pequot. Let's stay east and explore the area to the south. The southeast region had a humid climate and fertile land. These factors made agriculture important for the tribes who lived there. They settled in permanent villages to tend to their crops.
Human history and geography can and should be understood alongside one another. That video and others like it in our guide can help you ace questions that pull from different disciplines to find the right answer. Stick around for the practice questions in the last portion of this video for more on interdisciplinary questions. Let's move on to Objective 4. The government and economics questions will focus on your knowledge of key U.S. documents and figures, rights granted to citizens under the Constitution, and key principles of American democracy. Now, under the economics portion of the test, you will need to know the 4 productive resources, which are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, the functions and roles of the 4 major sectors of the economy, and personal spending basics. Okay, you made it through the content-focused sub-areas. Remember how I said that the last sub-area gets back into pedagogy? Stay with me and we will tackle it together. Remember, this one is different because it just consists of 2 constructed response questions. One of those questions will be about how to teach English language arts, and the other will be about teaching social studies. One of them might even ask you about integrating the subject areas, but both will test your knowledge of curriculum planning, instructional design, or assessment and evaluation. Be prepared to be asked for specific strategies to use in one of these areas. Also, each question will give you a specific classroom scenario, like a description of a social studies lesson a teacher is teaching, or maybe a language arts work sample from a student. You will be asked to evaluate that information, or to describe a strategy or method that the teacher should use. The good news is, these are pretty brief. We recommend you spend between 10 and 15 minutes on each one. Now, the best way to prepare for the CRQs is to answer some practice questions. I've got a sample English language arts question ready for you. We don't have time to do a practice social studies question in this video, but rest assured, the 240 study guide includes practice questions with sample responses for both of the CRQs, so you will be all set for test day. Here is our question. So it's the beginning of 1st grade and the student is reading aloud. Here is their running record. We're going to be thinking about those foundational skills we mentioned back in sub-area 1. We need to identify a strength and a weakness of that student's oral reading. Then, we need to choose a strategy we would use to tackle that weakness. Let's focus on the running record. The errors stand out, so let's determine this student's weakness first. Look, most of their errors are on words that begin with CR. That is a consonant blend. They change it to CL or drop the C altogether. So yep, they definitely need to work on reading initial consonant blends. We've got our weakness. Let's quickly find a strength. Well, we know this student is just starting first grade. I can see here that they read lots of simple kindergarten sight words correctly, like by and this. Let's name sight words as a strength. Let's go back to our question. Okay, we have a strength and a need. Now it's time to choose an instructional strategy to help that student with that need. What can we do to teach initial consonant blends? Think about phonics activities in a small group. There could be many correct answers. I'm going to suggest a word sort. Giving this student cards with CR and CL words on them would allow the teacher to help the student read them correctly and differentiate between them. Here's how I would write that up as a complete response. Notice that I wrote one short paragraph for each task. You can get straight to the point. No need for an introduction or closing. And that's how you tackle the constructed response questions. Remember, no matter what scenario you're given, your goal is to show that you know how to apply your knowledge of both content and teaching methods to help students succeed. Now, let's look at some practice multiple choice questions to show you how those objectives can appear on the test. Here's one from our first reading and language arts objective. Mrs. Wright is reading a fiction story aloud to her class. She stops throughout to model the think aloud strategy. In her think aloud moments, she makes predictions about what will happen next and reflects on what the characters learn throughout each plot event. What level of reading comprehension is she modeling for her students? Literal comprehension, evaluative comprehension, inferential comprehension, circumstantial comprehension. Okay, right off the bat, we know that circumstantial comprehension isn't even one of the levels of comprehension, so we can ignore that one. This is the right one. The teacher was modeling the ability to understand what was read without it being stated explicitly, which is inferential comprehension. She is using her background knowledge along with what is happening in the story to make inferences about what might happen next and what the characters learn. Let's go to a question from Objective 2. This is all about fluency, one of those so important foundational reading skills. A selection of students has been called aside for individual instruction based on the area they struggled in on a recent assessment. The teacher presents the students with a simple sentence such as, "The cat ran very fast." The teacher reads the sentence one word at a time with no intonation or expression. Then, she models how when people read and speak, it is natural to emphasize certain words in the sentence. She tells the group, "Today, we will be working on adding emphasis to a sentence and thinking about the effect that has on our understanding. I will call on you and tell you what word to emphasize, and then you will say the sentence, saying that specific word strongly." The teacher models once again, this time reading, "The cat ran very fast." Based on the nature of this activity, which area of reading fluency did these students need additional instruction in? Prosody, accuracy, speed, automaticity. Now, I initially thought the answer was automaticity, but nope, not this time. Through the question feedback in the study guide, I can see that automaticity is the ability to read words effortlessly. This activity is focusing on how to emphasize words and how that changes the meaning of a sentence, which would fall into the realm of prosody. What about a question from the writing objective? What might that look like? Students in a 5th grade class have been working on writing biographies about important people from history. Today's Writers' Workshop activity required them to reread their writing and identify ideas that need elaboration or clarification. They have also been asked to consider the organization of their essay to ensure the information is presented in a logical order. Which stage of the writing process are these students working in? Drafting, editing, revision, publishing. Ooh, I remember going over this earlier. Since the students are evaluating and making adjustments to the content of their writing, choice C, revision, is the one we want. Now, let's look at a vocabulary question. How can a 4th grade teacher indirectly expose her students to content-specific vocabulary that they will need in their upcoming unit as part of indirect and direct vocabulary instruction over the terms? Provide students with a list to define each word before the unit begins? Purposefully and frequently use the terms in class? Encourage students to use dictionaries when they come across unfamiliar words? Require students to find examples of the words used in the real world. This is the best choice. Purposefully and frequently using the terms in class will naturally expose them to the words and provide context for how they are used in a sentence. Since the teacher isn't directly defining or teaching these terms, it would be one of the various ways to indirectly expose them to the new vocabulary. Now, let's switch gears for a minute and try a couple of social studies questions. Let's start with a good old-fashioned history question. Which of the following rights did British colonists in the United States advocate for in the 1770s? Based on the year stated in the question, we know that we're talking about the events leading up to the American Revolution. So, let's use what we know about the causes of the American Revolution to see if we can rule out any options right away. Choice A is related to tariffs, which we know were a big part of the causes of the war. So, let's keep that one in the running. Choice B is plausible, but if you remember your colonial history, you can be pretty sure that the American colonies were producing raw materials, not asking for more to be imported. I think we can rule this one out. Choice C is about representation. You probably remember that no taxation without representation was an important part of the Boston Tea Party and other inciting events. So that one is definitely a possibility. And D is about US currency, which didn't even exist at that time. So that one is definitely wrong. So, choosing between A and C, I'm going to choose C because we know that representation was an important issue leading to the revolution. We reasoned through the choices and found the correct answer. It's C. Using process of elimination is an important strategy for selected response question. Let's move out of history and try our hand at a geography question. Remember how human development is part of the geography objective? This question is about how geographical factors have impacted settlement in the US. Which of the original 13 colonies is well known for being a trade hub due to its geographical features? This one is tricky because you need to use what you know about what geographical features were helpful for trade, major physical features of the US, and characteristics of the 13 colonies. So using what we know about geography, human use of the environment, and the colonies, we can determine that A, New York is the correct answer. Are you ready for your last practice question? Let's focus on government for this one. The Constitution includes a list of actions Congress may not do, prohibited powers. What motivated the framers of the Constitution to include this list on the document? I think B is the best answer choice here. The prohibited powers were meant to keep Congress from becoming tyrannical. This makes sense based on what we know about the relationship between American colonists and the British government before the Revolution. Whoa, that was so much to throw at you in one little video, but you made it through. Congratulations! If you found this video helpful, give it a like. And remember, this video is meant to help you understand what is on your exam, but there's still so much to do. So if you really want to make sure you are prepared for the GACE Elementary Education Assessment, take the next step now and subscribe to the 240 Study Guide. It has hours of videos so you can watch and or listen whenever you like. Most importantly, it is test aligned, so you know precisely what you need to study. It has hundreds of practice questions so you can be sure you're ready. So, click the link below right now to get started.